Test, test. Test. Good evening, all. Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10-4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by advertising such notice in the Home News Tribune, the Asbury Park Press, the Board Office, the schools, and on Cablevision 118 and Verizon Fios Channel 24, and by filing such notice with the Township Clerk. This meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. The board will take formal action on payment of bills and other agenda items.
Thank you, Ms. Lent. The Old Bridge Township Board of Education acknowledges that the law of this state establishes that members of the public, including members of the board, have the right to record public board meetings using audio or video recording devices, provided that that act of recording does not interfere with the business of this public board meeting. Therefore, the board makes it known that any such recording is to be considered a private recording of the individual and in no manner represents the official record of this board. The board therefore takes no responsibility for such private recording and completely disavows any future use.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Burns?
Here.
Ms. Callie?
Here.
Mr. Carroll?
Here.
Mr. Giordano? Mr. Marqueta?
Here.
Mr. Slade?
Here.
Mr. Silikowski?
Here.
Mr. Weber? Ms. Lent?
Present.
Quorum exists.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Code of Ethics Corner, highlight of the month. The board member makes decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll move it. DeCaro.
Anyone want to second it?
Burns will second.
Roll call. Any questions, discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Sorry. Yes.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Resolution 1 passes.
Report of student representative.
Thank you, Ms. Lent. Thank you. Student Senate, in conjunction with French Honor Society, is holding bingo night on Thursday. There will be prizes to win and food will be available to purchase. We recently started a Senior of the Month nomination. There was a form posted on the OB Announcements Teams page and the Class of 2022 Teams page. The winner, based on their overall excellence, will be announced on January 24th. Student Senate is currently conducting a coat drive. There are drop boxes at reception and the Student Senate office. And the Class of 2023 will be hosting a talent show on Thursday, February 17th. Thank you.
Mr. Cittadino.
At this time, may I have William Kennedy, Jacob Noor, and Nicholas Brown meet me at the dais. How you doing, gentlemen? Good, how are you? Well, for our board members and for our public who may not be aware, this is New Jersey State School Board Member Month, in which school boards across the state of New Jersey recognize the voluntary and dedication of our school board members who put time in and effort into making our schools great. Our students here wanted to help celebrate the work you have done as board members by showing you some of the crafty work that they do within the vocational education and technology classrooms. So for each of you, they have made a pen. Jake, can you help me for a second? What is the pen wood crafted from?
It's just crafted from wood. We use a lathe to carve the shape out, and then we use a press after to put it together.
Okay. Is it a special kind of wood?
No, it's just like any kind of wood, really, you can use.
Okay. But you say it's special wood
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
giving it
Yeah,
to,
oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
the board
Oh, yeah.
members, yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure what wood that
It
is.
is, right.
Do you know? If Mr. Borriello was here, I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
you would tell us exactly what kind of wood that is. But yeah,
So-
they're all made out of the same wood. I know.
That's special wood. So I'm going to ask you gentlemen to go up to the board members and present them each with a pen. Thank you for your work.
I believe the wood is teak.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will make sure that Mr. Giordano and Mr. Weber each get one as well. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing in the classroom and spending time with us tonight. I know we'll have a proclamation later on recognizing our board members, but I wanted to connect our student recognition portion of it with the work that our board members are doing. So thank you very much.
Can I please have a motion for the recognition?
Callie will move.
DeCaro will second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. DeCaro,
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I love it.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Ms. Burns,
Yes, and thank you.
Ms. Callie,
Yes,
And
and
Ms.
thank you
Lent.
very much.
and Ms. Lent.
Yes, thank you.
Resolution 1 passes.
Mr. Citadino, Superintendent report?
So I wanted to take a brief moment to report to the public, to our staff, and to the board, how far we've come in this pandemic since the winter break. After the winter break, we were one of 6 districts in the Middlesex County to remain open and uninterrupted. That had to do with a lot of the dedication of our staff, the commitment to belief in the programs that we have in place to keep everyone safe, and our families and our students for coming in and wanting to continue to be part of the learning process. We did so without any interruption to academics and extracurricular activities. We saw that when we returned back from the break, we had 180 staff absent the first day, and 1,214 students absent that same day as well. We've since reduced that by 33%, and today's staff attendance, we had 121 absences, which is very good and on par for a normal day in Old Bridge, and 542 student absences, Again, relatively average for a normal day in Old Bridge. Throughout that time, we had 4 updates from the Department of Health and the Department of Education that affected our schools. In 1 month's time, 4 updates came out with new guidelines, recommendations, whatever, what have you. It caused a lot of confusion within our community, as it did across the state. But through that, we were able to return with the information that was provided to our families and our community using the 5-day guidance for staff and for students. And last week we had 216 positive students in the community and 65 staff. As of today, Tuesday, we had 47 positive students of COVID and only 11 staff. We were able to do this because we worked through our meetings with the Department of Health. My team and several superintendents from the county met with the Department of Health last week. We wanted to understand the guidance that they wanted to put in front of us. I know it's a question that's going to come up later on in the public portion, so I'll answer most of those questions now. So what was important to the Department of Health was getting the students back in the classroom. For those school districts across the state that were not operating, that were operating remotely for the past 3 weeks, they wanted to get the students back in the classroom. That was their utmost importance. Secondary to that, they said that when reducing for the students or staff that were positive with COVID, that they made this suggestion or recommendation that days 6 through 10, they would wear a mask. That caused a lot of questions. Our nurse was on the call with us. As far as, several of the administrators across the county said, how do you bring students back and tell them to wear a mask all day when they have to eat, have physical education, everything else? And they said, do the best you can. That's hard to do when you get directives and mandates from the Department of Health that have never run a school. They suggested that we have ways to isolate those students. They eat in separate rooms. Well, anybody in education and parents know you can't violate students' rights that way and say, well, this student had COVID and we're going to put them in a separate room. You don't do that in any other illness. We weren't going to do it with COVID. Then I asked them, I think you think mostly about elementary schools when you put this together. Try that mentality at the high school. Having students that are back days 6 through 10 eat in a separate area. It's just not foreseeable. It's arbitrary, and it's not right to do to students. So I asked the question. We're year 2 of this, and we've had Omicron across the world in different regions. What have we learned about the chance of giving the virus to someone else, its ability to be transmitted to someone else on days 6 through 10? They said very low, if anything at all. The highest level of transmission happens the 2 days before you're symptomatic. Those 2 days are the days in which you have the greatest level of transmission. However, when you're identifying students through the 5-day quarantine, you have to go back to the first day they're symptomatic or test positive. We wanted to make sure this sat well with our nurses as well. Dr. Hoker had a meeting with them, with Audrey Baker in there. There was a lot of questions, but we had the support we needed to go forward. And in the end, when it came down to doing the best that we could, but making sure it was important for our students to be in school, we took the same approach we did with their recommendations for travel restrictions. If you remember, the state of New Jersey at one time had mandatory travel restrictions. Then they lifted them, and the Department of Health put in suggested travel restrictions. We never adopted those as a district because they were suggestions. They also put, as we talked about last week, vaccination restrictions for students to participate in extracurricular activities. Again, we did not support that recommendation because it's not what our schools are about. Our students who participate in extracurricular activities are the ones that go above and beyond for our district. And they shouldn't be punished because of something in which their parents do not believe in. So we were committed to having all of our students participate regardless of their vaccination status. And looking at the data that came out of the state of New Jersey today, And you see from every study, the numbers are coming down precipitously every day. And I'm proud to say, because all the work of the people in this room, everyone in this community, I believe we're going to make it to the other side of this wave without ever having an interruption. And I want to thank all of you for doing that. That concludes my report. I do want to, can I put Mr. Slade in? You had emailed a question about student contact time with computers. I think that'd be a great report for next month. Is that okay with you? Okay. And that's what we'll do. Looking at where our students were with computer contact time, pre-pandemic, in pandemic, and our plans for post-pandemic. Take a look at that, provide some data, and help you understand what the future of education is with the computer contact time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cittadino. Mr. Mara, any correspondence? Thank you. Any special committee reports? No? Okay. Moving on to hearing of the residents for any agenda item only.
Oh, hello, good evening. I have two questions on some agenda items. The first one...
You have to identify yourself.
Oh, I apologize. Hi, Kelly Ellis Foster, Stevens Avenue, Old Bridge. There are multiple items on the agenda about URSA, the URSA program. So all I would like is, when that comes up, if you could just share a little information about it. I know it's something, there's these programs starting next week in all the schools. I know it's something the administration and all the individual schools have been working on for a while now, and I think it's an important thing. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the programs that are being offered, and I just don't want that to be missed in all the discussion. So that's one thing. And then the other, so you don't have to answer now if you don't need to. The other one is there is a resolution on the issue, Mr. Cittadino, you just talked about, of not requiring vaccinations for students. And so my question would be to the board, and if you can just maybe bring this up in your discussion, is there a shift or a policy or a new action for the board of when the administration makes an administrative decision, is that always going to be codified by the board or only certain items? So that I can just understand this practice is a new practice, which is well within the boundaries of the board, but typically an administrative function or activity is not codified. So if I can relate, it made me think of another situation similar to this, a health-related situation, where the Department of Education suggested and recommends that athletes get their heart checked, and it's a program that any district can do. Not every district does it. Our district does do it. When the administration made that decision, it did not need a resolution. So I'm just curious of when is the board going to use resolutions or not, and what is the practice they're going to use going forward? That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Ms. Lunt, I have a number of items that were sent to the board secretary email address that I received today. The first one is from Matthew DeFranco. Quote, on Friday, January 14th, Superintendent Cittadino sent out a notice that the district had revised its COVID quarantine guidelines, which up through this point had been in alignment with the New Jersey Department of Health guidance. The latest version, though, deviates from the New Jersey Department of Health's guidance on the aspect of day 6 through 10, where those returning from having tested positive for COVID wear a mask at all times when indoors and around others. The district guidelines do to account for the mask requirement at all times when indoors and around others. As such, I would ask the administration provide clarity behind their decision now to deviate from the New Jersey DOH guidance as it relates to quarantine when they having up to this point in time been in fair alignment. Additionally, just about 2 weeks ago after winter break, Mr. Cittadino sent out a notice that moving down to the 5-day quarantine period and the requirement of those returning from COVID-positive quarantine wear a mask at all times was not feasible. For transparency, what now in the data supported this deviation and revision to the quarantine guidelines, and what were the thoughts on this revision by the district's nursing staff? Regards, Matthew DeFranco. That was number 1. Second email is from Ms. Stacy Barton. Quote, I felt compelled to reach out to the BOE after last week's meeting. I thought it was great to hear some new ideas. However, I, along with much of the community, am getting tired of hearing repeated emphasis on old ones. I think several of you on this stage have forgotten that you took an oath to serve the community. The last survey that went out showed the majority of parents, approximately 60% to 30%, in favor of continuing the same COVID precautions at school, including masking. Survey is attached below. How are you serving all of your community by prioritizing individual beliefs or the voice of a few over the voices of many? Writing a second letter to the governor to argue against a 30-day extension of masks in schools when cases are peaking certainly does not have my vote. Perhaps in 30 days from now it will, but it makes absolutely no sense to do that at this moment in time. In fact, I found it shocking that a first letter was sent at all, when from what I could tell as a community member, the district survey results have remained fairly consistent. I'm getting really tired of hearing people with absolutely no background in medical or mental health bring up issues to divide our community that we have no control over. Instead of fighting a losing battle against masks, what are we going to do about the loss of learning or mental health concerns that you have? What about the learning gaps, where some children are very ahead of their peers and some very far behind? There are so many issues our children are facing. We need to be problem solvers, not problem creators. No one here has lived through anything like this, and certainly we all hope we never will again. But causing divisiveness, and arguably more importantly, falsely representing the majority of the community, is not why you were elected. You were not chosen to the board for your stance on masks, so do not assume that all your voters agree with you on everything you believe. It would be beneficial for all of you to put your personal opinions and political viewpoints aside and focus on what your community wants. Let's perhaps focus on how we can keep our schools open safely. This will not happen by removing masks in the height of a new wave of COVID cases in the middle of the cold flu season when we have been masked for so long. This is basic health and science. I was very disappointed in my elected Board of Ed representatives when I watched the last meeting. You took an oath to serve and have an ethical responsibility to all that you serve. This past meeting, with the majority looking to pursue an action item that the majority of the community does not agree with, is extremely unethical and misrepresentative of the community. I hope you consider the majority of the community when you cast your vote on any and all issues facing our children and teachers. There is absolutely no room for your political or personal beliefs on the Board of Education. I am hopeful that moving forward we can all come together and focus on the things we have the power to change for the betterment of our children's and teachers and community as a whole. Thanks for your attention to my concerns, Ms. Stacy Barton. Unquote. The next item is from Ms. Kimberly Muscarello. Quote, "I will try and keep this short and sweet. As many of you know, if I was there in person, my emotions would probably take over, so I am putting in writing what I have wanted to say. Welcome to the new board members, and welcome back, Mrs. Lent. Many of you already know me. My name is Kimberly Muscarello, and I am not only a product of the Old Bridge School District, but also a parent and a teacher in the district. I am very concerned about the nature in which the masks are being discussed. There truly should be no discussion. In order to have the most protection and keep our schools open, which I believe is what we all want, we need to all be masked, not optional. By me wearing my mask, I am protecting you, and by you wearing yours, you are protecting me. By some discussing equal rights, by creating the option, then you are taking away the protection and others' rights. Trust me when I say no one is enjoying wearing them. I do not enjoy it, but is what must be done for now. I plead with you to stop wasting time at board meetings discussing mandates that are in place for a purpose and move on to bigger and more important things. On another note, with regards to the mandate that state students may remove masks when engaging in aerobic activities or due to extreme heat, I am the music teacher at Carl Sandburg Middle School, currently trying to finally put a musical back in person on stage, and I need to be able to have my students be able to do face-to-face on the mats. Then my students should be able to do sing and dance on stage without the masks, at least for performances, as it is extremely aerobic and under hot lights. This will only happen if everyone follows the mandates in place and wears the masks at all times to cut down on quarantines, hence cutting down on the possibility of the show getting shut down. Getting shut down again will only negatively impact the children emotionally, and as the board has stated, that is what you are trying to prevent. I plead with you, if you are truly representing the taxpayers and students and parents, then the way to keep all extracurricular and sports in place, you know the SEL that is truly important for our students, then keep us safe. Yes, you have a choice whether to vaccinate or not, but masking in public schools should not be a choice right now. I appreciate your time this evening, and I hope we can move on to bigger and better things. Stay safe and healthy. Kimberly Muscarello, unquote. The next item is from Colleen Blondo. Quote, "Good afternoon. I am the parent of 2 children in the Old Bridge School District. My children were recently quarantined and suffered greatly by missing in-school education. I urge you to please consider following suit with Middletown and stop quarantining healthy children regardless of vaccination status. This is clear discrimination. It is your duty to provide an education to all children. It is your duty to protect all children. We have now heard time and time again all people vaccinated, unvaccinated, boosted can spread the virus. Per the CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, quote, "Our vaccines are working exceptionally well, but what they can't do anymore is prevent transmission," unquote, January 10th, 2022. Also, I ask that you do not follow Governor Murphy's abuse of power and allow parents to make decisions for their children regarding wearing masks. More and more studies are proving the ineffectiveness of masks, especially cloth masks. Our children have suffered enough. Our children will never have this time back. The use and sacrificing of our children for political gain or empowerment is disturbing and needs to stop. Colleen Blondeau, unquote. The next one is from Jennifer Parisi Silvestro. Quote, "Breathing is essential. Trying to stop a virus with a mask is like trying to corral mosquitoes with a chain link fence. Mask, double masked, plexiglass, social distancing, vaccinating, double vaccinated, boosted, and still COVID is around. It is a virus. It will find its way to our bodies despite all efforts to the contrary. Our children are being damaged far beyond what COVID could ever do to them, Anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies are through the roof. While genuine science doesn't support mask use, there can be no denying that the social network of our teens has been destroyed and that they have been taught to fear not only the virus but each other. These issues are but a few of the hidden tolls that COVID and masking guidelines have taken on our young. Children with anxiety are told to practice square breathing, a technique that gets oxygen into their system and calms them down naturally. Masking prevents fresh airflow. Restricting breathing is an assault on the body and the psyche of any human being, and teens are in a very precarious situation when it comes to social, emotional, and physical development. Masking puts this particular at-risk community at further risk. I've heard people say that those who don't want to conform are selfish, they don't want to adhere to society's guidelines, that they are putting themselves and their children first at the expense of the group. This is divisive, dismissive, and condescending. To counter that, I'd start by saying it's not incumbent upon an individual to set themselves or their children on fire to keep another individual warm. And that doesn't change it when it comes to this particular virus, about which we have been whipped into a fear frenzy by the disingenuous media. Health begins with self. It's not selfish for parents who are protecting their children from all issues I listed above. Parents are the children's only advocates, and as such, our first and foremost responsibility lies with their well-being. In fact, as adults, it is incumbent upon all of us, our children, and asking this non-at-risk population to protect adults by non-specific methods, well, I would venture to say that it is the epitome of selfishness and is actually abusive, shameful, and cowardly. It is my hope that this community can come together and heal together in every way and not continue to act in an adversarial manner towards other parents. We need to find common ground. Mask if you wish, but mandates, enough is enough. I respectfully ask the board and Mr. Cittadino to look at real science that outlines the dangers of masking and reassess the OBTPS policy with regards to masks. Any references with regard to this data on mask risks, I will gladly provide upon request. Together we got this. Warmly, Jennifer Parisi, Integrative Nutrition Health Coach. Unquote. The next one is from Catherine Taborda, Taborda. Quote, hello, I'm a parent in the Old Bridge District. I'm currently experiencing the medical discrimination being done to our children. As child advocates, it is the board's duty to protect the children and not blindly follow arbitrary rules. I implore you to add to the agenda the policies taken by the Middletown BOE, specifically to stop quarantining healthy children regardless of COVID vaccination status. It is clear medical discrimination. As stated by CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, quote, our vaccines are working exceptionally well, but what they can't do anymore is prevent transmission, unquote, January 10, 2022. Pfizer CEO, quote, 2 doses of the vaccine offers very limited protection. If any, 3 doses with a booster offer reasonable protection against hospitalization and deaths. Less protection against infection, unquote. January 11, 2022. If vaccines cannot prevent transmission, then vaccination status is moot. Also, please add to the agenda the choice to make masking optional. Governor Murphy is abusing his power. His EO on mask mandates expires tonight. His overreach is criminal. Stop him by allowing the parents to choose what is best for their children. Masks have been proven ineffective, especially with Omicron. The legislature is sacrificing the mental health of children for their own selfish empowerment. It has to stop. Thank you, Catherine Taborda, unquote. The next one is from Gina Laffery. Quote, I was under the impression that is the Board of Education of Old Bridge Township Public Schools, not the Old Bridge Health Department. However, it seems you have gone beyond the Department of Health recommendation and mandated the placement of a medical device on our children. As stated by the FDA, the use of masks have not been proven for antiviral protection. As a matter of fact, it says on the box it does not prevent the spread of disease or infection. By placing this on our children, you're applying what is considered a medical device. If you're going to act in this capacity, you're required to obtain informed consent. According to the FDA, informed consent means that you need to provide the understanding and nature of the procedure or device, understand the risk and benefits, offered reasonable alternatives, and understand the risk and benefits of these other alternatives. It also states that consent cannot be obtained under coercion, meaning no undue influence, punishment, or reward. I've never seen any papers for parents to sign explaining the risks, benefits, or side effects for wearing a mask for 7 to 8 hours a day. I did not see an offer of another option, nor did I see anything asking for my permission for you to apply a medical device. Not only that, but I am pretty sure that saying a child will not be able to attend in-person school and receive a free, appropriate in-person education is a form of coercion. So basically, you haven't met the criteria. You haven't met the criteria for a free, appropriate in-person education to form coercion. So basically, you haven't met the criteria for informed consent at all. Excuse me. Based on this, not providing us with the risk or benefits for wearing masks, I had to do my own research. I have at least 46 studies, mostly from the National Institute of Health, demonstrating that these masks do not prevent the spread of viruses. I also have 26 studies from the National Institute of Health demonstrating that long-term mask wearing can have negative effects and consequences on the wearer, so you are all willing to take on the liability for any adverse effects on our children's health. These studies demonstrate breathing difficulties that are created and exacerbated by masking children. The CD only recommends masks, not mandates. The CDC is not a governing entity. If you don't drop it, we the people have a recourse to file claims against your surety bonds. With enough claims, you'll be uninsurable and eventually unemployable. The federal government has limited powers and has no governing power in the state issues in schools. Universal Citation Statute 9:6-1 is abuse, abandonment, cruelty, and neglect of child, which states using excessive physical restraints on the child under circumstances which do not indicate that the child's behavior is harmful to himself, others, or property, and willfully isolating the child from ordinary social contact under circumstances which indicate emotional or social deprivation. Cruelty to a child shall consist in any of the following, such as inflicting upon a child unnecessary suffering or pain, either mental or physical, and fatigue or other mental or physical strains that may tend to injure the health or physical or moral well-being of such child. I do believe that OBPS Code of Ethics, in accordance with NJSA 18A:12-24.1, every board member will abide by the following. Number 2, make decisions in terms of educational welfare of children and seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of the children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. Number 3, confine board action to helping to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. Have you consulted with the students? I am sure students, as well as many of the parents, have an issue with the medical device inhibiting their breathing, damaging the emotional well-being from students, having skin reactions or other dental issues, reoccurring nosebleeds, hypercapnia, and etc. Perhaps parents and students should start sending their medical bills for these experiences and trauma you're enabling and inflicting. NJSA 18A:11-1 states board members are entitled to express themselves publicly on any matter, including issues involving the board and the school district. I wanted to include this in my public comment to show my support for Sal Giordano. The last meeting where he was kicked out because he was defending his rights as per the Constitution, Article 1, Part 2, Rights and Privileges in the Constitution states that all political power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people, and they have the right at all times to alter, reform the same whenever the public good may require it. He was exercising not only his freedom of speech, but his freedom of personal beliefs and/or creed. unquote. Okay, the next one is from Shelley DeLuca. Quote, parents demand you unmask your children. You have no right to make medical decisions for our children. If parents or staff are still fooled into thinking masks work, they have the option to wear them. They have the option to get vaccinated. If masks work, then they should feel protected. Studies now show that masks are not only ineffective in stopping the spread of COVID, but are harmful for children physically, mentally, and socially. The University of Florida conducted a study. After normal wear of school-aged children for one day, they found 11 dangerous pathogens. We have masked our kids for almost 2 years. Masks have not been used for normal colds, winter flus, bronchitis, pneumonia, strep throat, and all other illnesses we face every year. This is no different. How does it make sense that the least affected age group are the only ones with a mask mandate and only within their school walls? Yet after school hours, children are playing sports, going to large venues, sports events, trampoline parks, birthday parties, malls, restaurants, stores, etc. All unmasked adults can go to stadiums, concert, bars, church, large stores, work, meeting, conferences, everyday normal life with no mask. Yet school boards continue to abuse our children. If you are not advocating for children and parental choice, then you are advocating against the best interests of our children and not doing your job. You are making up ridiculous protocols as you go. Stop medical discrimination against the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. They both get COVID and spread COVID. Stop different rules that you use as punishment against children who as a parent that has done their own research, follow the real science, and know for their children the risk of vaccine injuries do not outweigh the benefit. The inventor of the PCR test has stated it is not meant to be used as a diagnosis. Dr. Malone, the inventor of the mRNA, has warned against the danger of having mRNA in a vaccine that is especially dangerous for children. The CDC only recommends 5-day quarantine. You are not a medical expert. Medical decisions belong to parents, not schools. Unmask our children. Parents have enough. We are not going away or backing down. We are no longer willing to allow our school to use our kids as political pawns or allowing you to sell them out for ESSER funds. We will take back our schools, even if that means filing lawsuits, recalling, or voting you out. The line in the sand has been drawn. Unquote. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Tamara.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Francisco, and my 2 daughters go to Shara. I'd like to give a little background about myself so you can better understand where I am coming from. I, too, went to Shara many years ago, and I'm a product of Old Bridge Public Schools, as I continued on to Salk and graduated from the high school. I was also an elementary school teacher in another town for 10 years, and while I can't wait to get back to teaching, I need to fight for my children first and foremost. My children's teachers have been amazing in every way. They have gone above and beyond and handled this entire nightmare with grace, compassion, and dedication. Many of my close friends are teachers, and my 2 very best friends in the world are elementary school principals. I am fully aware of the daily struggles they face and have so much sympathy for the positions they are in. I'm not sure I have the same sympathy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can
Yes.
you just please put up your mask? Thank you.
I'm not sure I have the same sympathy for many of you. I want all of you on that stage to think of your why. Why did you want to be up there in the first place? So why am I up here? I'm up here because you aren't doing your job up there. For tonight, I will choose to focus on one topic, one that really leads to a much bigger picture and clearly the topic of the evening. Those who know me personally and or professionally know that I am easygoing, open-minded, and always respectful and professional. I will do my best to remain this way this evening. However, it truly gets harder each day. My husband and I are go-getters, doers, problem solvers, and we raise our daughters to be the same way. You don't like something, fix it. You have a problem, find a solution. The problem I have is with my daughters being forced to wear a mask. Yes, that's right, I'm talking about masks. Another parent going on and on about masks. Well, I will continue to talk about masks until my children have the choice of whether or not to wear one. Choice is something that we haven't had much of these days. It has been almost 2 years that they have been forced to wear a mask. 2 years. 2 years of my kids not seeing their friends' faces in school. 2 years of them not seeing their teachers' beautiful smiles. 2 years of trying to figure out how someone is feeling or what they are thinking because they can't use what they've learned about facial expressions and body language. 2 years of them breathing in their own carbon dioxide. So what is the solution? The only solution I see is people like me getting up here and sending in emails at every meeting and talking about masks, providing documentation and science that proves that masks are useless, which I would have time to do if you gave me more than 5 minutes. What does this accomplish? How is this a solution? Well, the only way it is if you, the Board of Education, and Old Bridge administration start listening and taking action for our children, the very children you were elected to serve. You have said in the past that our hands are tied. Take your concerns to the state level. Well, clearly that hasn't worked, and that's because that's not how this works. We have to work from the ground up. This would require you to stop blindly listening and following everything that comes from the top down. The analogy that someone used at last week's meeting about the frog jumping out of a pot of boiling water to save its life versus dying in a pot of warm water that was gradually heated. This is exactly what is happening to our freedoms in this town, in this state, and in this country. In 2020, if I had told all of you what would be happening in 2022 with COVID, none of you would have believed me. That's because this has all happened slowly right in front of our eyes. It is time to put an end to this nonsense and start putting the children first. Isn't that your why? Isn't that why all of you are up there? For our children. It is not my children's burden to protect others in society. That is up to others in their lives, friends and teachers alike, to protect themselves. If you want to wear a mask or get vaccinated to protect yourself, go for it. I have many family members and friends who have done so. I respect their decisions. My issue lies in the lack of choice. Our children are pawns in this ridiculous political game, and they are suffering the consequences daily. Everyone is so focused on physical health and ignoring the social and emotional well-being of our children, although it's supposedly addressed in the SEL curriculum. We are teaching our children to be kind, accepting, tolerant, compassionate, and inclusive to all those around them. Well, you aren't practicing what you preach through these lessons. Instead, we are causing detrimental harm by masking and segregating our children based on mask and quarantine vaccination status, even when the CDC has admitted the vaccine does not prevent the spread. I will never be the parent who sends their children to school without a mask, at least not yet. That would only further alienate them and cause emotional harm. So for now, they are voiceless. I am their voice. This is not their battle to fight. It is ours. It is yours. I beg of you, start being a voice for them. Start the job you promised to do, and remember your why.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Krista Fisher. I'm an Old Bridge resident. Welcome to the new board members, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Board of Education for keeping our children safe. I wanted to inquire what the process is when elected school board members don't oblige to the code of ethics that they swear to follow, and when they blatantly don't follow the law. A member not only didn't follow a state mandate, they also used their seat as a political soapbox. The Board of Education is supposed to be a non-political, non-partisan organization with our children's best interests in mind. Like many townships, Old Bridge's Board of Ed meetings have become just as partisan as our town council. Instead of discussing extracurricular opportunities and opportunities for students to thrive with their talents and skills, this member had just made quips about the governor enjoying vacations and placing obedience masks on people to showcase his political opinions. We need to start talking about education at these meetings. Let's move on and forward. Benjamin Franklin once said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." I urge the board to invest in our children's academics and broaden discussions on how they could thrive. And, for parents who do have an issue with masking, definitely, go to Trenton, speak there. This is a Board of Education meeting. We need to talk about education. Thank you.
Mrs. Lent, I hate to interrupt, but this is the agenda session, correct?
Correct.
So the topics that people should be commenting on the agenda.
Ms. Burns, there are a couple of items under old business that are pertaining to masking, so these would fall within your agenda session.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Francine Maraglia. I am a 23-year resident of Old Bridge. My children are almost 19, 17, and 10 years old. I am also the PTSA president here at Old Bridge High School, as well as co-coordinator of Old Bridge PTA's President's Council. Most recently, an Old Bridge District employee. I want to say, after digesting last week's meeting, I could not sit back and watch again. In September of 2008, I put my oldest son on a bus off to half-day kindergarten at Memorial School. I had no idea what to expect. I quickly got involved with the PTA so I could help volunteer. I came to admire and respect the teachers, staff, and administration. Not always perfect, but no one is. As the years went by, and Mr. Cittadino became superintendent, I believe in 2013, so many of those imperfections started to change. Things were getting so much better in our district. Our children were learning and thriving. The curriculum was and is not easy. The children were always challenged, but that's okay. They needed it. The Board of Ed and the admin were working well together to make sure our students had the best. Yes, there were bumps in the road through the years. Budget cuts, Cheesequake School, and now a pandemic. Through all of these bumps, what has remained a constant is the staff and admin in Old Bridge. For example, at the high school, there is extra help now for the students after school, which is working its way down through all the schools, as well as the academic mentorship program and mentorship for students who are struggling mentally and emotionally. Dr. Sasso and his team of principals are doing an amazing job of understanding and recognizing what our kids need and making sure they get it. There is no question that we are all sick of what's going on. No one likes a mask or remote learning, but unfortunately, the time that's being spent during these meetings arguing about an irrelevant letter is absurd. Please go fight the mask mandate in Trenton or Washington, D.C., not here, not where our children need to learn. Do you remember learning? How about the bus situation? Put your efforts there as well. I'm curious to know if the new Board of Ed members have attended Board of Ed meetings prior to COVID or PTA meetings. Or is it just now that you feel your freedoms are being taken away, that you feel it's time to do something? I respect your opinions, honestly I do, and I was asked to give you a chance. But once you start talking about power, who has this power? Who has that power? You lost me. Please get back to educating our children. And by doing that, we need to get Board of Ed members the proper training necessary to do the job you were elected to do. New Jersey PTA requires training for all board members. It would seem fitting that the Board of Ed members would have to do the same in some fashion. Just also to be clear, when certain Board of Ed members sit here and say they are the voice for parents, let it be known, you don't speak for me. It is clear you don't like the current administration. Well, shame on you, because prior to COVID, no one knew your names. If you weren't happy with the schools prior to 2020, you certainly didn't voice it here at Board of Ed meetings. I'm sure many people here and Board of Ed members did their due diligence before moving to Old Bridge. You knew the schools were excellent. Some of you have even said you have moved from New York to Old Bridge so your kids would have a better education. These are not my words. Well, there was a reason you did that. This pandemic won't last forever, and God willing, we will never see one again in our lifetime or our children's. But stop ruining our town and schools with this nonsense. Do better, do your job. Little by little, you are going to try and tear down all of the hard work the previous Board of Ed, Mr. Cittadino, and his staff has done. And then we will be left with what? What's your plan? As far as Mr. Giordano goes, I was going to address it, but I quickly realized he isn't worth the words. I'll just pray for him because he needs it. I can't fathom what is going on here anymore, why things are so out of control. This is a Board of Education, not a boxing ring. Our children are watching. Be the pillars of character that are taught in Old Bridge. If you can't, or sadly, if you don't even know them, please get off the stage. Thank you to those of you who continue to protect our children and staff every day.
My name is Robin Wolf, Cannonade Drive, Marlboro. I felt it was important to come and voice some thoughts. As a 7-year former board member who just finished last week in a neighboring town and an educator in Old Bridge, I wanted to say thank you to all the board members, as I know how much time and energy goes into it each and every day. It truly is a thankless job, so thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Cittadino and Dr. Hoker on the most challenging times in education. You continue to do what is best for our community. I grew up in Old Bridge. I too went to Shira. I went to Salk, and I graduated from Madison Central. And I have been teaching here for many years. I am so disappointed in this town. I have always loved. After watching the meeting last week and the behavior of a particular board member, I am embarrassed for this town. I have a hard time with someone who is elected to be a role model for our children blatantly sitting at the board meeting without a mask. This board member may not agree with the mandate, but is there for a reason. If my own children behaved like this, they would certainly have consequences. I believe that we have to follow any executive orders that are put in front of us. I don't think that anyone loves wearing a mask, but we do it. I don't think anyone loves wearing a seatbelt, but we do it. Our students wear seatbelts on the bus. I am sure that they don't love it. I don't think anyone loves taking off their shoes when they go through security lines at the airport, but we do it. We are asked to wear masks to keep others as well as ourselves safe. I hope that the other members of the Board of Ed continue to be respectful to one another and continue to respect our current situation. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
So much don't want to speak tonight, but again, I'm also kind of shocked about this board member running out of the meeting, and I want to talk about that tonight.
I'm sorry, can you just state your
Nina
name and address?
Joknowitz.
Thank you.
Anybody who's upset about the mask, go to Trenton. Come on, stop it. It's not going to be done here. We don't legislate. By the way, the Board of Ed member who ran out of the meeting last week, you may not have noticed that there were 2 council seats that were empty last week. By the way, every one of you who are wearing your masks correctly, thank you. By the way, the 2 council members who were not in the meeting last week, both of them had COVID. Both of them sit next to each other. Anita, I'm sure you know this by now, right? Anyway, if you want to do something about the masks and you're so upset, go to Trenton. If you want to be angry about it, go to Sam Thompson's office, but not here. Anyway, thank you guys very much. Be good. Can you pull it up over your nose, please?
Anyone else? At this point, we'll close the hearing of the residents. Mr. Cittadino, do you have any response at all?
No response at this time.
Okay, moving on to policy. I believe we'll cover policy and new and old business. Is that correct?
Yes, there's something under old business to
Well, you know
discuss.
what, you reminded me, it was so long, there were so many, that there was some. Dr. Tui, there was a question about ESSER programs. Just, can you give information as we're talking about educational programs and what parents can expect with the ESSER program and when they plan to begin, what we have at the high school, and as it trickles down to the elementary and middle schools?
Sure. This is the second year the ESSER program is offered in Old Bridge Township Public Schools. For this year, the program will begin in January of 2022 and run until May 18th, 2022, approximately 15 weeks. The ESSER program will run in all 11 elementary schools, both middle schools. The elementary schools will be before school, and the 2 middle schools will be after. The high school will be running an after-school study skills program for the ESSER program, which will be done in coordination with Mrs. Fazio and Mrs. Opdyke. Transportation will be provided for the middle schools, as well as nursing services. For the first round of invites, approximately 1,500 Old Bridge Township Public School students were invited. The second wave is going out this week, and program availability will be based on the staffing that will be allotted in each of the respective buildings. And the program will be reviewed constantly over the course of the next few weeks to determine its viability that it's meeting the students' needs. Thank you.
Just, when you said the second year, I know some districts use the ESSER funds just for the summer programs. This is the second year, in fact, we're doing after-school programs during the course of the school year, which is not common in most school districts.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you both. As we mentioned, policy will be discussed in new and old business. Moving on to curriculum and professional development. 1 and 2. Could I have someone move them?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Could I have a second, please?
Burns will second.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Any discussion or questions? Mr. Mara, roll call, please.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
And Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Resolutions 1 and 2 pass.
Moving on to athletics, item 1. Could I have a motion to move it, please?
DeCarroll will move.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Second, please.
Marqueta will second.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Resolution 1 passes.
Okay, moving on to finance, items 1 through 8. Could I have a motion to move it?
Marqueta will move it.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Second, please.
Burns will second.
Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Resolutions 1 through 8 pass.
Moving on to non-certificated personnel, items 1 and 2. Could I have a motion, please?
DeCarroll will move.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Could I have a second, please?
Marqueta will second.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Any discussion or questions?
Yes, separating number 1 for discussion, please. I'm sorry, number 2, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Silikowski.
Marcia Mancini, Transportation Secretary for 20 years of service. She's retiring. Thank you for your service. And on page 10, I believe, under certified personnel, we have 2 more retirees. Susan Denny Cooper, grade 5, 29 years. Kathleen Collin Sordano McDivitt, special ed, 31 years. The board would like to thank all of you for your service. We have a total of, I believe, 80 years. Congratulations, ladies.
Mr. Silikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
And Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 and 2 pass.
Okay, we don't have anything for non-certificated personnel operational. Moving on to non-certificated personnel other, items 1 through 6. Could I have a motion, please?
Callie will move.
Thank you, Ms. Callie. Could I have a second, please?
Marqueta will second.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 through 6 passed.
Okay, moving on to certificated personnel, items 1 through 27. Can I have a motion, please?
Callie will move.
Thank you, Ms. Callie, and I will second it. Any discussion or questions?
Again, congratulations to the retirees. They're in certified personnel.
Absolutely. Roll call, please.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
and Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 through 27.
Moving on to non-certificated personnel transportation, 1 and 2. Could I have a motion, please?
DeCarroll will move.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Could I have a second, please?
Slade will second.
Thank you, Mr. Slade. Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 and 2 pass.
Moving on to transportation, items 1 and 2. Could I have a motion, please?
Marqueta will move.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Could I have a second?
Slade will second.
Thank you, Mr. Slade. Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 and 2 pass.
Moving on to supplies, equipment, and services, items 1 through 3. Could I have a motion, please?
Burns will make the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Could I have a second?
DeCarroll second.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Sorry. Yes.
and Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolution 1, 2, and 3 pass.
Moving on to miscellaneous items, 1 through 5. Could I have a motion, please?
Marqueta will move it.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Could I have a second?
Slade second.
Thank you, Mr. Slade. Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 through 5 pass.
Moving on to board secretary and board business, items 1 and 2. Could I have a motion, please?
Callie will move.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Could I have a second?
Marqueta will second.
Thank you, Mr. Marqueta. Any discussion or questions?
I would like to, can I separate out number 2 for discussion?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I just want to clarify that we have this resolution here that we are already not discriminating. We are not forcing any student to get vaccinated. So I still don't see why this was necessary to be on the agenda for today, because as Mr. Cittadino explained to us last week, as we as board members already know, we are not putting restrictions on students that don't have a vaccination status. I mean, that's already being done. So I don't know that I agree with this being on here, because I feel like when we do that, we are putting our hands in the cookie jar, so to speak, and we are getting involved in the day-to-day operations. Unless somebody can, give me another reason why we want to have a policy on here that is about something that we're not doing anyway. Do you understand?
Mr. Caro, the action item on your agenda is a resolution, not a policy. So I think, and Mr. Marqueta, please correct me if I'm wrong, the motion came up last week to add this to the agenda, just to underline in anticipation of what ended up being part of the Department of Health's January 12th update, that this district was not going to be denying access to any students for that particular reason, and that this resolution is just to underline that fact based upon last week's discussion. Is that a fair summary, Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
So
Okay.
I think that's the intention of it. It's not a board policy. It's not a new document. It's not a new district policy. It is just a statement kind of the district's position.
Okay, so it's just reinforcing what we're already doing.
That's
Is that
correct.
okay? All right.
The only difference being that that updated Department of Health document came out between last week's discussion and this week's resolution.
Okay.
Mr. Parton, so the document that you're referring to, that was suggestions?
Yes, the Department of Health's updated guidance dated January 12th is not mandatory. It is not like an executive order.
Okay, so, and hopefully we're all going in the right direction, but should the topic of this resolution become the subject of an executive order, then
it would have the force of state law, and like all other state laws, your district would be obligated to follow it. At this point, this is not that.
okay. So Mrs. DeCaro said this, we're just basically doing a resolution stating that we're doing what we're already doing. Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
and Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolutions 1 and 2 pass.
Okay, moving on to hearing of the residents on any school district issue.
Good evening. My name is Dominic Sorrentino. I'm a resident here. I am a parent of multiple kids going to the schools. Mr. Marqueta brought up a point last week about the food service being provided at the schools. Kind of want to throw it off topic with the mask to the food service. So last week he brought up the situation where my son ingested pizza from the cafeteria that had mold on it. Previously, I understand that everyone had to pay for their food, and this situation cannot happen to these kids. I actually went to Old Bridge High School and then joined the military and recently was deployed. And even when I was in the military, I never had food like this. I'm asking for a change for my kids' sake, and when we can possibly see this change happen. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly Ellis Blaster, Oak Ridge. I have a question And then, and kind of actually a comment carrying, maybe I'll do my comment first about the food services. It is frustrating, and I can understand how bad it is when food services makes mistakes, which it happens. It's certainly unexcusable. But in a district our size, I don't know how many meals we serve daily. Mr. Vera probably knows. I would think about 8,000 when we look at breakfast and lunch. Unfortunately, things probably do fall through the cracks, and I think we certainly can work on improving that. However, I think it's important to look holistically at what our food services does. And what I don't forget is that during the height of this pandemic, our food service staff produced and helped serve over 10,000 meals a week in this community. And that's for people who may have lost their jobs and people who might have gone hungry if it wasn't for that. So I would just make sure you look at it holistically of what the service is. And as we all know, the biggest room there is the room for opportunity or improvement. So I just would want to throw that comment out. We don't want to serve our kids bad food, for sure. But I did have a question from last week, and I remembered the situation differently, so actually, Mr. Parton, I guess this is for you. You gave an explanation of Mr. Cittadino's contract, and I think I understood what you said, but you're much smarter than me, so sometimes I can't follow. So I just want to say it in terms that I understood, and if you can, correct me if my interpretation was wrong. So as you said, at the end of this year, school year, June 30th, Mr. Cittadino's contract is up. The board was obligated, based on his contract, by a certain time in July or August, I can't remember, to notify him if the board was not going to renew. And at that time, as you said, Mrs. Burns submitted, after a discussion, the board did not indicate to not renew. So basically, his contract stayed. My question for the clarification is, what happens July 1st of 2022? And my understanding is, if the board and Mr. Cittadino do not come to a consensus on new terms of a contract, and no action is taken or nothing happens, that come July 1st of 2022, he has a same contract he has with all the terms and conditions, just no change in salary or change in anything monetary or anything like that. So I just was not clear on what that was, so I just was hoping you could clarify that. And I'll go sit down and
Ms. Lent, do you want me to answer that now? Sure. Yes, Ms. Sells-Foster, the reason that your question sounded awkward is because you were accurately quoting the law, which is awkward. There were two actions before, and there was one action before the board, and there is another action before the board. By state law and by the terms of Mr. Cittadino's contract, by August 31st, 2021, the board had to advise him if they were not going to renew his contract. They did not do so. Instead, Ms. Burns, as the senior ranking non-conflicted board member at that time, notified Mr. Cittadino after discussion that the board was not going to end their relationship with him at that time. So now, by June 30th, 2022, the board and Mr. Cittadino may negotiate a new contract by law with a duration of between 3 and 5 years. Again, that's a statute. If the parties are unable or unwilling to reach agreement for new terms of a new contract, again, by statute, the old contract, the current contract, remains in place for another same term, meaning another 5 years with no changes whatsoever except for the dates. So the board, Mr. Weber will be appointing personnel and negotiations committee members. I'm sure in due course they will be discussing with Mr. Cittadino where he stands and where the board stands. Those will be private discussions, which will result in a public resolution, and it will come up on an agenda at some point, one way or the other. But yes, that is what happens under the various different scenarios that can happen with the superintendent. Does that answer your question?
Andrew Lewis, President of the OBEA. I regrettably will also be addressing the ongoing discussion that we've been having tonight regarding masks. I want to begin by addressing comments that were made during the reorganization meeting on January 6th. The family of a sitting Board of Education member made false accusations about one of my members. The incident described that evening never occurred. I'm here tonight to demand that this Board of Education member apologize to the teacher and all educators in the district. I will not allow my members to be used as pawns in your political theater. Making false accusations at a public meeting about an educator is a detriment to their personal and professional lives. The teacher who was falsely targeted was stressed, anxious, and disturbed by these comments. As a veteran teacher and a mother of 2 children, you brought one of my members into your anti-mask political rhetoric, and I'm not going to tolerate it. You're entitled to your opinions regarding masks, but as it stands, and has been mentioned tonight, they are required in our schools. This is not the place where that's going to change. That's in Trenton. I would like this board member whose family made these accusations to apologize tonight. As a community, it's time that we move on. Time for our Board of Education to begin focusing on education. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Mr. Mara?
And Ms. Lent, just in response to Ms. Ellis Foster's comments about the food service, we are averaging this year approximately 100,000 meals served each month since September. And again, I'd like to thank her for acknowledging the work that the Aramark staff did during the period where we were delivering meals all over town, an amount of about 10,000 per week. And I do have some additional emails that I received that relate to other items affecting the Board of Ed. First one is from Kenny McGee. Quote, on Monday, January 10th, the OBEA sent out a one-question survey to all the Old Bridge teachers asking if they would be comfortable working in a masked optional environment. 70% of them answered no, and on Tuesday, January 11th, Governor Murphy extended the mask mandate in schools. What this shows is that the teachers of Old Bridge don't care about our kids. The definition of comfortable is providing physical ease and comfort. Since when is doing your job supposed to be easy and relaxing? All the teachers and the 70% only care about themselves and not our children. They don't care about what the masks are doing to our children physically, mentally, and socially. Do you know what is uncomfortable? Is telling your child that masking will be over soon and trying to explain why the masking isn't over because of the political clout the teachers union has over Governor Murphy. In my eyes, I see all of you 70% of teachers as Murphy minions. You should all be ashamed of yourselves for putting yourselves first over the welfare of thousands of children that just want to get back to normal and be kids again. If you don't care about the kids, when you should really look for another job. You're a bunch of spoiled adults dictating and forcing fears onto a generation of children. Will you once put yourself in the kids' shoes and see it from their perspective? Probably not. If you are double and triple vaxxed, you can catch COVID and spread COVID all while wearing a mask. Masks, vaccines, none of it has worked. When will you all realize that? When you all learn to live with this. When will you start to be an example and stand up for these kids? When will you stop living in fear and start teaching those beautiful smiling faces that you have forced to wear masks for 2 years now? When will you step up and do your jobs and stop worrying if you will be comfortable? Enough is enough. Take a long, hard look at yourself and why you wanted to be a teacher. Was it to teach children and be an example in their lives, someone they will never forget, or are you the one they will never want to see again because you forced them to wear a mask? The one that only took the job for the summers off, a good salary, and benefits. If you are the latter, then go find another district to work in because you are not welcome in Old Bridge. Kenny McGee, unquote. The next one is from Lucy Kurtz. Quote, let me begin by saying I was disheartened after attending the last Board of Education meeting and the action of several members of the board. We need to move away from the political platform that some have taken, and we need to focus on what is important. Academics being the first in order to see the success of our students, since that is of the utmost importance. Rather than tear each other down, let's start fresh by building each other up as Old Bridge has always done, and let's commend our administration and staff, since there are some of the most trying times we are all enduring. Old Bridge follows the Be Kind mantra, so let us all try to focus on all the good happening in our great town. Thank you, Lucy Kurtz, unquote. The last one is from Salvatore Giordano. Quote, I am absent from the meeting because my semester begins today, as most other colleges
Point of order,
are.
Mr. Parton?
Yes.
This is a board member. He is not at the meeting. Is it okay for him to be talking during public comments as a board member?
It is. It's similar to what Mr. Mara reads at the beginning of the meeting, where members of the public, including members of the board, can record the board meeting. So in this circumstance, unable to be here, Mr. Giordano can, within his 5-minute time limit, make a comment during this section. As a point of order, Mr. Cittadino, Mr. Mara, and I discussed today, because these meetings are in person again, this email option is going to go away. The timing of that will be discussed in executive session later on. But just because Mr. Mara has had the opportunity to read many emails tonight, it's important for the board, for the public to know that because meetings are back in person, this is not going to be the format for long. We will get back to you with exact timing on that. Back to you, Mr. Mara.
All right, again, from Salvatore Giordano, I am absent, quote, I am absent from the meeting because my semester begins today, as most other colleges are. Regardless of your opinion of me being asked to leave last week's meeting for existing, it cannot be denied that the things I predicted and warned people about since May 2020 has unfortunately come true. Even with most people injected, the approach, especially in schools, has stayed the same or even gotten more extreme since then. The classes of 2020, 2021, and most likely 2022 have not and will not get to experience the senior activities and the important face-to-face guidance for college and the workforce that I was able to get not that long ago. I can't imagine the damage that was done to younger students during that time, so I apologize to them too. Projects like the renovation of Lombardi Field, something I had control over, was done even though students weren't in school. I have always been in favor of choice for students and parents focusing on actual education before capital projects, and I hope we can discuss more decisions that are in our control in the future. Good luck, board members and members of the public, and as always, I answer all my emails. Thank you, Salvatore Giordano, unquote. That's it, Ms. Lunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Sorry, Mr. Dunn.
Good evening, Richard Dunn, 58 Norman Lane, here in Old Bridge. I just want to make very clear something to the public. I can tell you unequivocally that the teachers in this district are extraordinary. They give 110% of their time. They love our children. They love this district. And they worked hand in hand with the Board of Education to keep our programs intact by taking pay cuts or keeping their wages lower so that we could keep our programs. Now, when you're going to disparage teachers, that's not a good thing. These are the people who adore, these are the people who give, these are the people who go home. They go home and do the work after hours. There's no disparaging of teachers. That's uncalled for and inappropriate. These people mold our children. Yes, we may disagree about masks. I don't like masks. I disagree with the mandates. I made that very clear, but we cannot put that on the shoulders of our teachers. They are here to do a job. They do it very well. And you know what? We're very proud. When I was sitting up there as a board member, we believed that the teachers were partners, and they did everything in their power to give our children the finest education. We need to back them up. We're not here to belittle them. We're not here to disparage them. We need to work together. That's number one. Number two, David Cededino. I know that this is a big gorilla in the room, but I can tell you unequivocally that Dave is an extraordinary superintendent. I know there's going to be disagreement about that. I have known Dave for 12 years. I was on the board when he was given the unbelievable position as superintendent here in this great school district. Under his stewardship and leadership, this district has excelled. This district rose from the ashes. We were subpar as a district, not because of the teachers, not because of anything that they were doing. It was because of the administration prior. And Dave came in. He changed the culture. We elevated SAT scores. Our schools become blue ribbon. There's so many different accolades. And I understand there's a disagreement here. When I was on the board for 10 years, I had my issues with Dave. We've had arguments. Sometimes we weren't friends. But that's part of the position with being a board member. But I can tell you what is this man's heart, and he cares about every single child in this district. And I'm hoping, and I'm going to implore the board to give this man another opportunity. Because you know what? Every superintendent over the last 2 years was giving a situation beyond their control. And to penalize someone who has done remarkable things for our school district is unjust and unnecessary. So with that said, every meeting I'm going to come up here and talk about Dave because he deserves an opportunity to be the steward of our children. So with that said, thank you everyone, and good luck and good night.
Good evening, everyone. Sal DePrima. I'll make it real quick. I just want to echo what Mr. Dunn said. I've been involved in this school district as a prior board member, a PTA officer, a parent, whatever you could think of in the past 27 years. The teachers in this district are remarkable. They care about the children. To say anything other than that, put all this other stuff aside with COVID and masks and blah, blah, blah. The teachers do a great job here. They do care. I know that personally. And also, Mr. Citadino, I was part of the board that brought him in, I guess, for lack of a better term. And he, too, is doing an excellent job. He cares probably a lot more than you people know. There's a lot that goes on that's not seen. You just got to believe it. Trust me, please. Thank you.
Hi. Is it okay for me to read a letter to that somebody wanted to be read?
Absolutely. Just state your name and address, please.
Okay, my name is Michelle Mann. The letter is from Michelle
Cordero. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right. I'm sorry, Michelle, if you're watching and I'm messing up your last name. I also have to take off my glasses. Okay. Here's her letter. She writes, I am a licensed clinical social worker practicing psychotherapy for close to 20 years. I am also a mom of two elementary age children and a resident of Old Bridge. While the mental health impact of COVID is both widespread and significant, I want to stress the fact that making general statements without the credentials to do so can only add to the misinformation we are seeing so regularly. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I have worked day in and day out providing direct therapy to individuals struggling, many of whom have intense levels of anxiety and depression fueled by the fears associated with COVID-19. Of the many patients I treat, there is not one single one that has reported any mental health impacts of wearing a mask. Not a single adult nor a single child. I have no colleagues who have reported any patients who have been impacted by either. While some find it uncomfortable and annoying and others feel it is an impingement on their rights, no one has expressed a resulting increase in any mental health symptoms due to wearing it. We can agree with science or disagree with it. Since I am not a physician or an epidemiologist, I messed up that word, I won't voice my opinion. We can agree or disagree with the politics impacting the pandemic. Since I am not a politician, I won't voice my opinion on that either. What I will do is voice my opinion, my professional opinion, regarding the mental health associated with this pandemic. What we know as clinicians is that the impact of COVID on our mental health has just begun. While there are significant increases in intensity of anxiety and depression, disorders like PTSD have not even begun to rear their ugly heads. For those of us that work to mitigate the impact of the virus on the psychosocial functioning of society, it is important that misinformation isn't spread. While masks have had no impact on the mental health of children, see attached research published in the Journal of Children and Adolescent Psychiatry and Mental Health. What we do know has impacted children significantly is the anxiety associated with the unknown, the fears associated with a loved one getting sick, the separation from their peers academically and socially, and most significantly, with the grief associated with loss of family members or friends. There have also been significant economic impacts on families, which subsequently led to an increase in domestic violence and child abuse. While we tend to focus on the negative associated with our current circumstances, it is important to note that there can also be some significant positives. Children are learning resiliency firsthand, and families are spending more time together. Both will contribute to their future success. Again, I want to stress it is important that those without the professional knowledge or the credentials not make blanket statements about mental health. Stigmas are already a hurdle for those suffering. As a mental health professional and as a mom, I urge empathy for mental health, especially now. Thank you.
Andrew Lewis, OBA. I would like to...
Mr. Lewis, you got about 2 minutes left in your time.
That's fine. I would like to respond to the comments that were shared by the board secretary regarding the OBA from a Mr. Kenny McGee. The staff in Old Bridge are dedicated to the students of this district. We're one of, as Mr. Cittadino mentioned, one of only a few nearby districts that have kept our school buildings open since the first day of school in September, in large part due to the staff who care about your children. My members' safety and need to feel protected in doing their job. In a survey question, if that upsets you, if that's a concern to you, then I welcome you to apply to become a substitute teacher in the district and just step one day into our shoes. We're in desperate need, as I'm sure many of you know, of additional substitute teachers. So Mr. McGee, I look forward to seeing you as a substitute. As you said, enough is enough. Enough of attacking my members who dedicate themselves to your children only to be disrespected by people like you, Mr. McGee.
I'm Scott Mazzella. I'm the PR guy that's supposed to make all this look good. I'm speaking as a teacher. I just want to thank Mr. Dunn, too. Thank you for that, and Andrew. But I had COVID. Some of my colleagues had COVID. A lot of my students had COVID. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Cittadino told us to be the bridge. And the bridge that we're trying to be is the bridge from one normal era to a different normal era. And we're still on the bridge. We're not at the other side yet. But all the people who had COVID, whether it be myself or my colleagues, and of course the students. We all came back. Nobody quit. Not one. A lot of students were working from home, of course. A lot of staff with COVID sent lesson plans in every day. They didn't stop working. Nobody wants this, okay? Nobody. What I want the world to know is we came back. And we came back every single time, and so did the students, and that's what's going to get us to the other side of that bridge. So let's be the bridge, and I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for doing this up here. But I want us to get to the other side of the bridge, so who's with me?
I copyrighted that, so.
Yes, copyrighted. And I wish I wore a better outfit. I wasn't expecting to come to the microphone tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak at this point?
I just want to offer a point of clarity that Old Bridge has made. What's the great thing about this town, this community, is all of us working together, and there's many great families that are part of our educational team, and there's many great families that are part of our overall community. And I want to be clear that when you send in an email, we have no proof that's your name. So there is one family by that name, and there's nobody in that family that has connection to that particular name, Kenny McGee. So I know you guys are empathetic and wonderful people, and you wouldn't result to that. But for the members of the public who might be listening, people do strange things when feeling desperate and feeling pressured. I don't want anybody to mistakenly target anyone based upon a name. That's probably a made-up name. So do the right thing.
At this point, we'll close the hearing of the residents and move on to old business, which we have 2 items, Mr. Parton.
So those are open to board discussion at this point. The board reserves the right to discuss policy issues as a whole, and that was added to your old business as well as to be referred to the policy committee. But Mr. Marqueta, I believe that this was your request, so if you want to start the discussion, I did provide, Mr. Cittadino and Mr. Mayor did provide the board policy, the current policy 2425 to all board members, and I provided some of the language that was raised last week for discussion, so that can be discussed at the pleasure of the board now.
So basically, I just wanted the language of that policy shifted a little bit. It's like that the administration can work together with the board and allowed to come up with a curriculum, an online remote learning curriculum. And then there was something else that after I was reading the policy again a little carefully, the first 2 paragraphs on the first page, it's very broad. It says that the local health authorities or it's a very broad area of who could close the school or who could recommend to have the schools closed. So I would just like to close that in a little bit and just have it say by law. Whenever if it comes down from the top of the governor again, that should be the only way that we are able to close schools.
Okay, so I guess the best way to go through this discussion is to talk about, if we go in order, if we talk about what Mr. Marqueta just and he and I talked about this before this meeting started. In the first 2 paragraphs, there is a lot of language in there. Talking about the instances in which the board may be required to move to a remote platform. What those instances all have in common is that they have the force of law. So to simplify and clarify, it would certainly be legal to change the language. And board members, do you all have this policy in front of you? Members of the public, I'm sorry, you don't have it in front of you. But what it says right now is that there are these certain instances in which the board may, or the district may be obliged to move to a remote platform. The simplification that Mr. Marqueta and I discussed this evening for consideration by the board would say in that first paragraph, in the event a school or the schools of the district are required by law to close for more than 3 consecutive days. And that would be, we would then remove due to a declared state of emergency, declared public health emergency, or a directive by the appropriate health agency or officer. The reason for that would be that each of those instances is a situation in which the board and the district and the superintendent and the administration are required by law to move to a remote platform. Any discussion on that possible revision to your board policy? And certainly, Dave, if you want to talk about that, you're, needless to say, a big part of this conversation.
In short, making that decision was the hardest decision I ever had to make. If someone else wants to have that responsibility, have at it.
Any other board members?
Yeah. So last week, and I'm happy that we did this, when I suggested that we all have the policy in front of us, this is basically the reason. So the policy as it's written, or what was suggested by Mr. Marqueta, is that the board make the decision regarding the remote plan in case of a closure. And I think there was a misunderstanding there. I think that it was read to be that the board would make the decision to close, but this policy, in fact, if I'm reading it correctly, is if the state or the Department of Health or another government agency declares that we have to close school, then Mr. Cittadino has the right to implement the remote learning plan that we were required, again by law, to file with the Department of Education. And then Mr. Marqueta just said that he wanted the board to be able to decide on a curriculum other than remote. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. But in the event that, and Mr. Cittadino used a Superstorm Sandy, God forbid, another pandemic, God forbid, a 6-foot snowstorm, God forbid, if the school has to close for more than 3 days, you don't want the children not learning. The only way they're going to learn is remote. This decision isn't whether or not Mr. Cittadino has the authority on his, on his own to close the schools. It gives him the authority to implement the remote learning plan that's on record, filed with the Department of Education. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
What would, in your legalese, what would be the alternative if we did not use the remote learning plan that's on file with the Department of Education as required by state law?
There is an alternative. You could choose, as you do with standalone snowstorms, if you will, normal snowstorms, to the extent that makes sense, you could close your schools. You could make the decision, as you do on a snow day, to simply close schools for all forms of education, in which case you're still at whatever day count you were at the end of the day before. And if it's a month-long closure, then we're really getting into a bad situation, because that 180-day requirement is an absolute. So that is why this policy...
It has to be completed by June 30th, the 180-day requirement.
That's correct, yes. That is why this policy talks about more than 3 days of required emergency closure, because short of that, snow days are going to happen. Snow days happen every year, almost. But a long-term closure is something that this school district and every other school district in a Superstorm Sandy situation have to either figure out, or in a 2020, 2021 and counting situation, have to figure out how are we going to make these days count in whatever format we can deliver education under extraordinary circumstances. Right now, you're back in person. This policy has no effect right now.
So, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I just want to clarify. This policy doesn't give Mr. Cittadino the right to close schools for 3 weeks because of Superstorm Sandy. It gives him the power to implement the remote learning plan in case the schools, due to a state of emergency or Department of Health or another government agency requiring that schools are closed, the remote learning kicks in.
That's correct. The closure does not come from anybody in this school district. The closure would be coming from a state authority with the authority to do so.
Okay, so if we take away his authority to implement the remote learning plan in that instance, then our kids aren't learning anything. And we are missing the days then.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be true, Ms. Cowley, but my understanding of the language that we were talking about in the lower paragraphs, because right now we're just talking about by law, so the closure itself. The what happens next language is what was sent to all board members on January 12th, and that's the language that talks about the superintendent moving to the remote platform, and that he'll have the authority to implement the school's district's program of virtual or remote instruction, and that he'll consult with the board prior to such decision if practicable. In other words, if, God forbid, there's a true superstorm sort of emergency, we'll all communicate as best we can, obviously. But that will be done on consultation and in communication with the board, and with, obviously, as much notice to students, parents, and staff as possible. So that's if the remote platform must be enacted because somebody has told you you have to close schools for a long period of time. That somebody would not be Mr. Cittadino. Mr. Cittadino and you as a board would be reacting to a state-level requirement. That's the only time that this policy has any effect.
I'm also thinking that there's a scenario that that doesn't make this as far-fetched as it sounds, or is like you'd hope it's like every 100-year type of situation or less with a superstorm. Carl Sandburg Middle School is, I believe, one of 2 county large shelters. If something happened within the county that devastated a lot of people's ability to have shelter, that would be designated as a shelter, and we would have people, not necessarily from Old Bridge, but from within the county, taking residence there. We then would have a difficult place operating a school at the same time because they'd be using a lot of the same facilities. You know, when you're living in the place, you're showering, you're eating, and again, this is not something anyone would do lightly, but in the state of a real emergency where life and death are taken into account. In that type of situation, most likely the students of Sandburg would opt remotely, or we would do a split schedule with Salk. So just, keeping all of that in mind, there's opportunities or real reality situations that are not so far-fetched in which something like that may take place.
Yeah. And that is true, but that is another example, like the 6-foot snowstorm and the flood or whatever else. In that case, the Office of Emergency Management, State Police, would be effectively commandeering one of your buildings, which is a designated shelter, and you would be forced to make alternative arrangements, again, triggering not your decision, but your response.
Mr. Parton, so just an issue which just popped into my mind. If the superintendent was required to consult with the entire board, there are open public meetings notification requirements also. So, and typically we are required to advertise for those type of meetings that require the entire board.
Yes.
Are we exempt from that under those circumstances?
Well, there is the emergency meeting option, Mr. Mayor, in the event of a true emergency when public 48-hour notice cannot be provided. The board, by a majority vote, special rules, of course, can convene a meeting on short notice. But the language that was presented to the board is that the superintendent shall consult with the board prior to such decisions to the degree that's practicable. So if there is a flat-out crisis, the board will be notified as quickly as possible that a school or the district has been shut down. The superintendent will not do anything unilaterally except move to a remote platform if there is no option for in-person learning because somebody has closed your school or district. So in that case, the board would be consulted still by whatever means are appropriate and necessary. If that was going to happen with advance notice, and I can't think of a circumstance in which that would happen, you know, we're going to have an emergency next Wednesday, certainly we'd schedule a meeting, and the board would be completely in the loop before it happened. But that kind of notice and deliberative process kind of flies in the face of emergency situations. But I'm sure it could happen. Other questions about this from the board?
I just want to say, you know, I think just going over some of the things that was said last meeting, I really believe that one of the things that bothered me a lot was the use of the word power. That to me was very disturbing because I don't believe that I am here. I don't feel that I want to have more power over anyone. What I am here, the reason that I am here, and the reason that, you know, someone asked about my why, the reason I am here is to help the students achieve and to set them up for the highest level of success that I can as a collaborative board member with administration. So I don't believe that the word power should even be used in this situation. And what I really think, and I think what's happening here is, you know, and I'm not going to fault, you know, Mr. Marqueta. You have a lot of things that you want to do and you campaigned on, and I'm not. I don't want to fault you for your desire to have change, but what I will recommend is you will learn a lot. Like we have to do, as board members, we have to take training every year, okay? And the very first year of a first year board members training is about everyone's role and responsibility, okay? And you know, who administers the day-to-day action of the district and who oversees the policies. And I believe that once, Mr. Marqueta, you take that training, you'll understand why there's such a back and forth going on here. I understand your need to, your desire to want to affect change. But what I would like to see is if you just sit with us for a little bit and learn the ropes a little bit, and you know, and we can have these conversations because I have no problem with having discussions. Mr. Cittadino is always open to discussions. Mr. Parton, as we know from the past couple of meetings, will answer any and all questions. So let's start there before we come to a meeting and just want to throw motions out, just, you know, something as important as this. That's what I would like to see.
If I could just make a comment, the way I'm reading this, it just looks like it's an attempt for checks and balances. I don't think it's a matter of power. I think it's just a matter of more collaboration.
Well, you used the word power last time. Last week, you used the word power several times.
I never used the word power.
Oh, yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Absolutely.
Okay. We can go back. So to me, it's just a matter of checks and balances.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Slade.
Yes.
I apologize.
It's
Oh,
okay.
I thought that was Mr. Marqueta talking. I apologize.
It's okay.
You did not. You absolutely did not.
Okay. So.
I apologize.
It's okay. We make mistakes. So yeah, I'm reading this as a matter of checks and balances, as a matter of just not leaving the responsibility on one party. You know, the collaboration of the board with Mr. Cittadino. I'm sure he doesn't, like you mentioned earlier, he doesn't want to sit there and make the only decision to close schools and remote learning for, 18 months. So I'm just reading this from Mr. Marqueta. That's more of a checks and balances, that we collaborate a little bit more on decisions on how long they last and who initiates them.
Absolutely, I agree. I agree with you, Mr. Slade. Collaboration is very, very important, and that's why I think maybe, and it's great to have this discussion, especially with all the public here. But what I suggest is that we just move this discussion to our policy meeting where we can really focus and hone down in a smaller committees. Our committee structure is that it's a chairperson and usually 2 board members per committee. Other board members can go to all of these meetings, and public is invited to attend. But it's an easier way to have these discussions, and Mr. Parton really breaks down everything. But no, definitely, Mr. Slade, and again, I apologize. I can't apologize enough for that. I do agree with you. Collaboration is very important.
Anyone else? Okay, item number 2.
So, well, let's see if we can wrap this one up. There are 2 options that you have now. As Mr. Slade said, this is more of a revoicing than a change in your policy. But if it's the board's pleasure, we can take this amended language, put it on your February agenda, and then if everybody's comfortable with how it looks, then you can vote on it the next week and revise the policy to clarify what is really already the case, but just to make sure that those checks and balances and that cooperation and that collaboration is expressly stated. So we need board consensus for how we're going to go from here. You are not required to commit it to the policy meeting because you have had this discussion as a policy committee of the whole right now. So I think, Ms. Lent, we need to see if the board's will is to place this on your February agenda for approval as revised. So
So we would do a roll call?
a straw poll. This is not board action. This is just board direction whether to place it on your February agenda, unless anyone has any questions about this or about what I just said.
So this is a straw poll on policy 2425.
Right, to place the revised version on the February agenda.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
So this is only going on the agenda, this isn't approving it, right?
Yes,
Okay.
That's correct.
Yes.
Mr. Caro?
No.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Solikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Okay, straw poll passes.
Okay, and then the next item that you have under old business is the discussion of a letter to state officials regarding state mandates and local control, which again is something that was proposed last week by Mr. Marqueta. You can have that discussion if anyone has any language suggestions. Your previous resolution that was passed was provided to all board members just as not a working draft, but just for your information of what you did last time on this same issue. What you do next on this same issue is a question for board consent. If you agree, you have, as I said last week, you have every right to send a letter every week if you want to. You also have the right to never send a letter again. This is truly a board decision and a board discussion.
I put together a letter. If the board wants to see it, I'll offer it to you. If you don't want to see it, you don't have to. So I put together a letter, so if you want to look at it, I have it with me. If not, then
I'd like to see it.
But weren't you supposed to have a copy of a letter that went out to kind of springboard off of?
You have a copy of what went out in, I want to say October. That was provided to you on January 12th.
Oh, okay.
This is.
And that's a letter that went up to,
It was a board resolution that was publicly sent out for everyone's information, and it was not sent as a letter to any elected officials. It was just a board resolution.
also, a letter never went out.
That's correct.
Oh.
So it's just, if the board would like to add or take away, I think we should do it together. So, fire away.
Can we?
Yeah, this is a public discussion, so it can
Yes.
certainly be read.
Dear Governor Murphy, the majority on the Old Bridge Township School Board would like to kindly ask the governor to please reconsider his health emergency mandates on the children. We have taken an oath to protect the Constitution, and this sort of governmental overreach is what we were sworn to defend. In the New Jersey State Constitution, it reads, "All persons are by nature free and independent and have certain natural and unalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and of pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. The definition of liberty is as follows: the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. The mandates you have set in place are clearly violating the Constitution. As we approach the 2-year mark of 15 days to flatten the curve, I think it's necessary to state that as of this moment in time, that 6,350,580 people, or 71.5% of New Jersey's population, have been fully vaccinated, out of a state population of 9.24 million people. Vaccines are clearly available to those that want them. Masks can be worn by those that want to wear them. We would like to implore other school districts in the state of New Jersey to stand up to the governmental overreach and stand in solidarity in telling the governor that we do not comply with these mandates on the children, or any mandates in general. We implore our legislature, both Democratic and Republican, to join us in taking a stand for the very thing people come here for, freedom." So that's the language.
Any comments or discussion on the letter?
I'm going to need a few more minutes to go over it.
We did a resolution in October. Was that when we did the resolution?
Yes, I believe that was October.
Okay. Could we not, first of all, the resolution didn't do anything, and this letter's not going to do anything either. We all know that. Governor Murphy's not going to read this letter and say, Old Bridge is right. I'm wrong. It's not going to happen. It'd be nice. I don't like wearing this mask either, but it ain't going to happen. Could we send the resolution that we already had instead of spending yet more time on masks?
Can you? Yes, that's a question for the board. If that's the consensus of the board, that's of course
No,
an option.
Just a letter to Governor Murphy that, the Old Bridge Board of Education passed this resolution, whatever else it needs to say to get his attention, or somebody's attention.
It doesn't have that has less of a bite than a letter, no?
It might, but it's toothless regardless. This letter isn't, it's not going to do anything. Like I said, he's not going to read this letter and say, oh, wow, they're right. I don't have a problem with sending a letter, except that we're spending more time on masks. But the paragraph of, standing in solidarity and we will not comply, we can't have that.
What about if we just take out the "we will not comply" and then just send him the letter asking the other districts in New Jersey to stand with
Well,
us?
you could stand in solidarity or ask other districts to stand in solidarity in letting the governor know that we do not agree with these mandates, but you can't, I wouldn't say we will not comply, because you can't not comply. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but, I'm a Board of Education member, okay? I'm a legal assistant. If I don't comply, if I take off this mask in this building where it is now a law to wear it, and somebody reports me and I get a disorderly conduct charge, then, okay, maybe I'm found guilty, maybe I pay $1,000, kind of doubtful I'll get 30 days in jail. If a teacher or one of the administrators does the same thing and gets a disorderly persons charge and is found guilty, they can no longer work in their chosen field. They lose their certificate. They lose their license to teach, to be a superintendent, an assistant superintendent, a principal, whatever. So this it means more to some people, and like I said, We just can't.
It's not necessarily the masks that make the problem, it's the fact that you're taking away certain rights as far as freedom of choice goes.
No, I understand what you're trying to say. I'm just saying that I don't think it should have the tone of saying that we're not going to comply with these mandates, be it masks or anything else.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm okay with taking that part out, but I'd like to at least leave in the lines where we are asking other districts to stand with us. I think that leaves more of an impact, and I think we'll have more, if it does happen, that more districts will stand with Old Bridge than not.
Are other districts going to read this, or is this just going to the governor?
Well, it's going to be made public, so other districts will read it.
How is it being made public, like through this meeting, or are
Well,
we publishing it on the
Well,
website?
after we send it, we would release it to news outlets, media outlets, and if they choose to publish it,
Are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to?
I'm sorry, I was speaking to the superintendent. Can you repeat that, Ms. Callie?
That's okay.
Sorry, Ms. Burns.
Are we allowed to publish this letter and give it to news outlets as a board?
Yes, the key being as a board. So if 5 or more board members choose to do that, and it's not illegal, then yes, you can do it. As far as the specific language, that's something that would need to be worked out carefully. Probably, and Mr. Marquette and I briefly discussed this, to say that we will not comply, that language probably needs to be tweaked a little bit, because threatening to violate a law is not something that you want to put in writing from the Board of Ed. As far as standing in solidarity against it, if that's the pleasure of the board, you can certainly do that.
So we don't have the other, we do, we have it, where is it?
yeah, it was sent in email.
Yeah, it's in that January 12th email.
Oh. Thank you.
If I could just interject for a second here, what I would suggest is, obviously not wasting the public's time on this right now, but create an ad hoc committee that could discuss the language of the letter, and then we could present it to the board at a later time.
I'd agree to that, yeah.
I think that's important because I'm noticing a few hands want to be raised, but because we're doing this at a board meeting, the public hearing portion is already over. But if we did it as a true policy or ad hoc committee, the public would be allowed to speak during that time, outside those time limitations, and you can get the input from the public.
If Ms. Lent, if you choose to convene an ad hoc committee to discuss this, obviously as board president at this moment, you would have the authority to name the committee members. And one thing that you could do, again, it's just an option, is to have that language put together by a group of board members, placed on your first February agenda for discussion, and because it would be on your February agenda, certainly for public input, and then board action at the second February meeting.
We would name the members right now, or would they be able to?
You could do it right now if you choose as
Mr.
board
Parton?
president.
Mr. Parton?
Mrs. DeCaro.
Can we make it a committee of the whole meeting? I think we all, because I just think we should all be involved in the conversation.
You could, yes, you can legally make it a committee of the whole meeting. That would require all 9 of you to agree on the specific language with, if it's a committee of the whole, it would be a public event, public input, etc. But yes, legally that is an option if that's the will of the board.
Should we take a straw poll to see who would want to be part of this committee? And see if everyone is interested in joining it before we just assume?
If you wish to do that, you can. Ultimately, the membership on any standing or ad hoc committee is the province of the board president, or on nights like tonight, of the board vice president.
Lucky me. Okay. So let's take a poll and see who would want to be part of this committee.
Okay, Ms. Callie, yes or no?
Are we doing?
On the committee, just on the committee.
But Ms. DeCaro's suggestion was to do a committee of the whole, so we're not doing a committee of the whole? We're doing,
No, first we're trying to determine how many committee members, how many board members want to be on the committee, and that could be the committee of the whole, if everybody says yes.
If you have 7 board members wishing to be part of this, then you're talking about a committee of the whole meeting if Ms. Lent, so.
then yes.
Okay. Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Silikowski,
Yes.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
and Ms. Lent.
Yep, we got a party.
It is unanimous. Okay, move on.
So then that would be to be scheduled. You'll have really a policy committee, a policy committee of the whole or an ad hoc committee of the whole meeting, to which the public will be entitled to attend, and there'll be a public comment portion, and hopefully at that you can come up with final language of a letter and the decision of whether or not to do that.
Okay. Executive session. You're still
So that would be to be scheduled.
Past his bedtime.
Now you need discussion on any other old business. Those are just the listed items for old business. Board members have the right to raise any other issues.
I have a question about the food services that came up. There was an incident last year, I believe, where we had food service people come to our meeting saying that they were short-staffed. Is that continuing to be an issue? Any updates on that?
I think the food service company is subject to the same problems that, COVID problems that we have. So they are short-staffed at this point because of quarantines and sickness, and once those people come out of quarantine, they come back to work. So they're doing the best they can to man all the schools as much as they possibly can. I know the manager is effectively going around to schools cooking when necessary, if it's necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Any other old business?
I don't know whether this is old business or new business, and I'm probably going to get stoned for this, but I've received countless emails, telephone calls, text messages, and read many, 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 many social media posts from parents begging this board to get back to the job that we're supposed to be doing, educating the children. I realize that masks and vaccines are a hot topic. It's been discussed and discussed and discussed over and over again. There are only so many ways to say this mandate holds the weight of the law. I'm correct, right?
You're correct, right?
Thank you. It holds the weight of the law. I realize that people are very passionate about it. I don't like the masks either, but I don't want to use this term because I know we were criticized for using this term, but our hands are tied. And I gave you the reasons before. Mr. Cittadino can't stand up and say, okay, everybody take off your masks. Okay? Because that's, I don't know, a disorderly conduct charge times however many people are sitting here, however many teachers are sitting here. You'd lose a lot of teachers very quickly once the court heard all the disorderly persons charges, if they were found guilty. I really would love to get this board back to what we're supposed to be doing, which is educating the children. Or how about talking about some of the great things that are going on? Wait, I have a for instance. I mean, I know it's ESSER, and I know it's being funded by the grant, but is she still here? Miss Obday? Hi, how are you? Okay. I don't know if I have enough for everybody who wants one, but I have copies of the flyer that she put together regarding the after-school help for the children, and this is part of ESSER, right, Mr. Cittadino? Yes. It is, okay. So they're up here if anybody wants them. That's a great thing, trying to take care of the learning gap. I just, please, I don't know, is there any way we can say that discussion on masks will be the last 15 minutes of the meeting and only the last 15 minutes of the meeting? I mean, can we pass a resolution about that?
If it's, when it's on your agenda in any way, then it's part of comments on agenda items. When it's not on your agenda, it's at the end, and yes, you could structure public comment to save masks for the end of that section, or do them right at the beginning. But when it's on the agenda, that's a different category.
Okay, well, then I'm imploring the public, like we have been implored over the last week, to let us get back to what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, I would love to say, take it off, don't wear it ever again. Okay, I just wanted to personally thank the teachers, all the teachers, not just the educators that are here, but all the teachers in our district. I'm sorry, that letter by whoever it is, and obviously it's according to Mr. Cittadino, not really a Mr. McGee. I'm sorry, that letter made me cringe, and I am praying that whoever he is a party of one. But there is I think I can, if I may, speak for the entire board, that there is nobody sits up here that agrees with any portion of that letter. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming back after you've had COVID. Thank you for risking yourselves. Thank you for everything that you do. And Scott, good luck turning this into a good spin. You're not sleeping tonight. Well, like I said, good luck. Again, just please consider letting us get back to what we're supposed to be doing. I'm done.
Any other old business? New business?
I have new business. So there is a spring leadership conference for administrators on March 18th. That's free. That's given through njcie.org, and they will be talking about inclusion and a grant that is associated with their services. And if any of our administrators wanted to take it, it's free, so that word is out there. And in the spirit of focusing on education, I did something that was really selfish. It was for me, and I put together a resolution, and I stole this blueprint. Yep. So just going to read it, and hopefully we can get it on not next week's, but our next agenda. And if anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns, we can, of course, address it. So here it goes. Where it is a primary goal of the Old Bridge School District to create schools that are inclusive of all students and the diversity of needs that exist in our region, and we give particular focus to the inclusion of students with disabilities. Whereas our school district believes that there is a need for students to have maximum opportunity for access to general education settings. Therefore, be it resolved that the Old Bridge school system hereby endorses the following inclusive school practices for every child. Students are first and foremost general education students who may require additional supports and services in order to access their education. All students will have the opportunity to participate with same-aged typical peers to the maximum extent that they are able. School programs, including extracurricular activities and intervention, shall be accessible to all students regardless of the supports and services they need. School staff will make every effort to use language that describes first person, people first language, when referring to students, families, and programs. Inclusive practices are not a separate component of education, but rather a core ideal that will be present in all of our schools and all of our district programs. We hold high expectations for growth and development and honor the requirement that students serve in the least restrictive environment. We also hold high expectations for staff and are committed to providing the support and resources needed to help staff uphold those high expectations. The diversity of our community makes everyone better. We celebrate the differences and the ways in which every child adds to the fabric of our communities. With these inclusive education practices in mind, now it be resolved that the Old Bridge School District celebrates all students and strives to model professionalism, respect, empathy, and high expectations for every student in every setting. And I would also just like to thank the teachers that are educating our students. Our students are back in school because of them. Some people know that I have a child out of district and I have one in district. My child was just out for 3 weeks, and some of that was due to staffing shortages in the out-of-district placement. So thank you for showing up, even when it's hard. Thank you.
Board members, discussion of placing that on the next agenda?
It reads very well. I mean, I would like to get a copy of it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be okay for her to email that to everybody with the disclaimer, do not reply?
So why don't email it to me, and then I will make sure all board members get it.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional new business?
I don't have new business. I just have a comment. I don't know if, I just don't know if you want to wait till anybody else has new business, or if anybody knows it.
Are we finished with new business? All right.
Okay. No, just really simple. I'm not going to belabor anything. We've been here a long time, and I just want to, I appreciate everybody that came out tonight. I appreciate everybody that, that commented, expressed concerns, but what I most want to do is just say thank you to all the teachers that came out here tonight. We value you. We appreciate you. Don't ever let anyone tell you any differently. Just ignore people that say things that are negative. They are the lowest percentage of people. Know that you are appreciated. And again, thank you all for coming tonight.
Anyone else?
I don't have anything under old business, just a couple of concerns from the community. The CPEG reached out to me regarding they feel like their curriculum is being ignored. Maybe I'm using the wrong words. I don't want to misquote them, but they would just like to have like a tougher curriculum for them, because they're saying that and I know they said they reached out to the superintendent. So they said that the 3-year-old and 14-year-olds have the same curriculum, and I'm just trying to figure out why. Like I wouldn't know where that would go. And then the second thing would be the ESSER the ESSER program that Ms. Cowley's talking about. It's tough for some parents to get their kids there early in the morning without the transportation. I know I brought this up to Mr. Mara. I just wanted to bring it out that just want to put it out there for the rest of the board. See if maybe we could work on something with both items. Again, I don't know where it goes. I'm not trying to pass a resolution. I don't want to make the board crazy again. But if there's something that could be spoken about or done or taken care of, just like that, they could feel better.
I would suggest and appreciate you bringing those forward.
They also they said that when they reached out to you, was very responsive.
Okay.
So just want to put that out there too.
Thank you. And I know that it was something that came up, and I believe Dr. Tui discussed that particular claim at a public meeting. But I think it is something we can revisit and invite CPAG to the curriculum meeting when Mr. Weber is here and he points people for the curriculum chairs. I don't know if you wanted to touch base with it now, Dr. Tui?
This Thursday, there will be a SEPTA meeting at 7 o'clock at Glen School. At that meeting, Ms. Christine Doherty will be going over that particular curriculum issue for the LLD classes at Sandburg, which was brought up early in the year. Additionally, with the relaying of all of the district curriculum on the district website, which is currently available at oldbridgeadmin.org, which you can go and check out the curriculum. We are continuing to review our curriculum specifically for our MD program, which is listed on the website as a supplementary curriculum. So we used the base curriculum for all K through 8 classes, and then the MD curriculum that is currently on the website is used supplementary to address some of the daily living needs of the students in those programs. But Thursday, SEPTA, 7 o'clock, Glenn. See you there.
Thank you, Dr. Shuey. Great reminder. On the second issue of the transportation piece,
We're going to be actually discussing that in executive session tonight.
exactly. Thank you. I just have 2 items of positive news, if we want to use that. Excellent. 2 students that have done great things in the district. One is Victoria Mion. I don't know if you know this or if you know her as a former student. She is now in the running to be Miss New Jersey USA, and she's representing Old Bridge. So I'm not sure if she's doing a social media initiative to get support and financial support for that. I know we will be supporting her as well. So please reach out and support her. And also, 1 second, please. I want to have the right wording. Megan Valenzola, who is a wonderful student from Old Bridge High School. She's done a lot of positivity campaigning in the district. Just going to give her the shout out. She was selected as a high school student to attend the Stanford Legal Seminar this summer, and one of the only student from obviously from Old Bridge, but many students who applied to this, and she was selected to take law classes at Stanford this summer. Something we should be very proud of. And lastly, there's a bit of good news. Any of our staff members know that I've been doing the COVID testing, saliva-based COVID testing outside my office Monday through Friday. We're going to continue doing that until at least February. We'll assess it then and see how we're doing. Right now, when we started, we were doing about 15 a day. Now we're probably down to 3 or 4 a day. So it'll be there if you need it until at least February 1st, and then we'll let you know from there.
Anything else? Okay. I just want to say this is an incredible pen. I did not want to sit in this seat, and I've been playing with it all night, like nervously, and it's taken fantastic notes. So thank you. So we'll close new and old business, and could I have a motion to go into executive session?
Yeah, you need a motion for exec session for food service contract status, for personnel and attorney-client privilege issues with the 22 budget, and with the Nike-based property.
Could I have a motion, please?
Burns will make the motion.
DeCaro will second.
Thank you both.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're going in at 10:02.
And just for clarification, the board will not be back out. We will leave straight after exec session.